never believed that moving into this old house on Elm Street in Pennsylvania would be the beginning of my end. I needed a quiet, affordable place after my divorce, and this house seemed like a Victorian dream, a large garden and very low rent. The agent said the previous tenants left suddenly without paying the last month's rent. In the first week, strange things began to happen. I would hear light footsteps in the attic at night, as if someone was walking slowly above my head. At first, I told myself it was mice or old wood contracting, but then a strange rotting smell started rising from the basement. A scent that was sweet and disgusting at the same time. On the seventh night, I woke up to the sound of a child crying, the voice very faint, coming from somewhere underground. I got up, trembling, went down to the basement holding my flashlight, and turned on all the lights, but I found nothing. The next day, while I was trying to fix a leaking water pipe under the stairs, I pried up a loose wooden board and found a narrow secret crawl space. I reached inside and pulled out the first thing I touched, a lock of long black hair tied with a pink child's ribbon. My heart stopped. I continued to dig cautiously and pulled out a small bone fragment, a child's femur, and a pile of rotting children's clothes stained with old brown spots. I fell to the floor, unable to breathe. The horror I felt, I cannot even describe. I am now living in a house with hidden human remains. I ran upstairs, locked the door, and sat in the living room shaking for hours. I called the police immediately. They arrived 15 minutes later, saw everything, and said there was an old cold case from 2018 about a family named the Hargroves who suddenly disappeared from this house. After the police left, the terror multiplied. I couldn't sleep. Every night I would hear strange noises, heavy footsteps in the basement, the sound of breathing near my bedroom door, and sometimes the sound of light tapping on the wall from the inside. During these days, I would stay awake for a whole day without sleep, trying to interpret what was happening. I almost lost my mind, and I started investigating on my own. In an old kitchen drawer, I found old newspapers with the headline, "Family of 3 Disappears in Pennsylvania," featuring a photo of a mother and 2 children. The mother's name was Emily. Elderly neighbors told me that the husband, Tom, was in debt to dangerous people and that he fled after the disappearance. Personally, I began living in a state of constant panic. I would check every room before I went to sleep, place chairs behind the doors, and sleep with my gun by my side. One night, I heard the sound of repeated faint stabbing coming from the basement, as if someone was stabbing wood. I went down and found an old piece of metal stained with that same dark brown color, and behind it, another part of human remains. The smell was stronger. I felt like I was going to lose my mind. I started imagining how the husband killed them here, hid them in the secret spaces between the walls and the floor, and then fled. I am now unable to leave the house except during the day, and every time I return, I find something small has moved. My mug in a different place, or the kitchen door open. The police said the investigation takes time and that they would send a specialized team, but I felt they didn't care. I am alone in this house with the remains of an entire family hidden inside. Paranoia has completely taken over me. Every shadow I see, I jump. Every sound I hear, I grab my gun. Tonight, everything reached a breaking point. I heard the sound of clear, heavy footsteps on the stairs, not like before. I grabbed the gun and went down. I found the basement door open, and the smell of old tobacco was very strong. I entered and heard the sound of breathing behind me. I ran upstairs quickly and tried to open the outer door to escape, but the car wouldn't start. Someone had tampered with it. I went back inside the house, locked all the doors, and sat in the dark, trembling. Now, I am writing this letter on white paper I found next to the newspapers in the kitchen drawer, and I can hear a sound moving slowly on the floor above me. I know that Tom, or whoever has continued this game, is back. The remains I found won't be enough for the police to act quickly. I am trapped in this house, which has the bodies of an entire family hidden in its walls. If anyone finds this, never live here. The footsteps are coming down the stairs now, and I am holding the gun with a trembling hand, knowing I won't be walking out of here alive. I'm a 20-year-old YouTuber, and my hobby is filming videos of abandoned places. I live in Detroit, USA. One night that I will never be able to forget, the winter was brutal. and snow was falling heavily on the deserted streets in the old suburbs. I was looking for a location to film a video for my YouTube channel about abandoned buildings. I had heard about Eastside General Hospital, which had shut its doors over 20 years ago. It was a massive 6-story building, filled with long corridors and abandoned patient rooms, and it was known to be a refuge for the homeless and sometimes drug addicts. But I was confident in myself. I entered through a broken side door, carrying my powerful flashlight and a GoPro camera, and told myself, this is going to be insane content. The place was bigger than I had imagined. Corridors branched out like a maze. The walls were covered in peeling paint, and the floors were littered with glass debris and old medical records. I walked for about an hour, filming, talking to the camera about the hospital's history, the fires that had occurred there, and the stories I had heard from locals. Then, I decided to head back, but when I reached the side door I had entered through, I found it locked with rusty iron chains, as if they had been affixed there for years. I laughed at first, thinking maybe someone had locked the door to prevent addicts from getting in or something, but I tried to open it with force and it wouldn't budge. I tried every door I knew on the ground floor, and I found every single one locked or blocked with thick wooden boards. Snow was piling up outside the broken windows, and darkness began creeping in from every direction. I tried to call my friend Jake, but there was no signal. Here, fear began to strike in my chest. Not supernatural fear, but the real fear that I was going to die of cold or hunger in a place like this, far away from any help. I kept roaming the corridors, trying to find any other exit. The upper floors were worse. The stairs were full of filth and foul odors from stagnant water that had leaked from the roof. On the 3rd floor, I found a room that looked like it had been used recently. Torn sleeping bags, empty tuna cans, and used syringes lying in the corner. I heard the sound of light footsteps somewhere far off, slow and intermittent steps, like someone walking cautiously so they wouldn't be discovered. My heart started pounding hard. I know that in Detroit, people use these places for dealing or to escape from the police, and they are often armed or desperate. I tried to hide in a side room, turned off my flashlight, and sat on the cold floor trying to control my breathing. The darkness was thick and the silence was terrifying. After a few minutes, I heard the sound of heavy breathing very close to me, like someone standing at the door. I didn't move from my spot, cold sweat running down my back despite the bitter cold. After long hours of waiting, I decided to move again. I went up to the 4th floor looking for a window I could climb out of, but the windows were high and surrounded by rusty iron grills. I found an old nurse's notebook with writings about patients who died there in the 90s, as if time had stopped. Hunger began to consume me, and the thirst was even worse. I drank a little stagnant water from a rusty sink and immediately regretted it because my stomach cramped up. Early in the morning, I heard the sounds of cars far outside the building. I shouted with all my might from a broken window, but no one replied. Then I heard the sound of doors opening and closing on the lower floors, multiple footsteps this time, and the sounds of rough whispers in slang English. I knew they weren't police because the police wouldn't enter here without a major reason. The real terror was in realizing that I was trapped with people who didn't care if I lived or died, and they might see me as a threat or an opportunity. I kept running from room to room, hiding my tracks, but the building seemed to be swallowing me more and more. On the 3rd day, or maybe the 4th, I lost the sense of time completely. I was weak, suffering from the cold and hunger, and the fear had turned into raw despair. I found an old operating room on the 5th floor, filled with rusty tools and dilapidated beds, and there I decided to stay, trying to rest a little. I heard their voices closer now, 3 or 4 men, laughing in a terrifying way and talking about the stranger who walked in. One of them was calling out in a loud voice, "Come on, buddy, we won't hurt you." But the way he said it made me shiver. I tried to go down a fire escape, but I found it blocked with broken furniture. In a moment of despair, I broke a window on the 6th floor and tried to climb down using torn bed sheets I had tied together, but the wind and snow were harsh, and the sheets tore, and I fell onto another interior roof. I broke my leg in the fall. The pain was burning, and my blood was bleeding onto the cold floor. I heard their footsteps approaching, the sound of their heavy boots on the debris. I tried to crawl away and hide behind an old cabinet, A few seconds before I saw them, I was trying to organize my thoughts after everything that had happened. The ones who found me were a group of construction workers who were inspecting the abandoned East Side General Building before they started demolishing part of it for a development project. It was the 5th or 6th day. I don't remember exactly, but they said they heard a very faint sound like a moan from the 6th floor. One of them, a man named Mike, came down with his flashlight and found me lying behind the cabinet, my leg broken, covered in frozen blood, and nearly unconscious from the cold and dehydration. They said I was delirious, talking about the footsteps and the voices, and that they were afraid at first that I was one of the addicts roaming around there. But when they saw the camera and the GoPro next to me, they understood that I was just a stranger who had gotten in by mistake. They moved me first in their own pickup truck to the nearest spot with a signal, then they called an ambulance. The ambulance took me to the modern Detroit General Hospital, which was completely far from the abandoned hospital. Another hospital, normal, full of doctors, nurses, and modern equipment. I spent weeks there, leg surgeries, antibiotics for the infection I caught from the stagnant water, and psychological therapy because I would wake up from nightmares screaming. The police came to ask me many times. They took the camera and checked the recordings, but most of it was dark or intermittent because of the battery. They said they entered the building later with a full team and didn't find anyone. No traces of the men whose voices I heard, no sleeping bags, no syringes. It was as if the place swallowed everything, but I know what I saw and what I felt. Now I am out of the hospital, in my friend Jake's apartment, but the terror hasn't left. Sometimes I hear footsteps at night outside the door, or I smell the old rot that was in the corridors. The police closed the file and called it an exploration accident, and they advised me to stay away from abandoned places. But I am sure that those who were there are still there, waiting for the next idiot to walk in. And me. I can't go back to filming or enter any old building. Every time I close my eyes, I see the peeling walls and the locked doors, and I wonder if the construction workers hadn't arrived at that time, I would still be there, or worse. The story hasn't ended, but I tried to survive. Now I have lost my job, and I can't film in abandoned places, and I don't know what to do.